All right. So funding your dreams, understanding financial aid, right? So whether you are a current college student or a high school student looking to go to college or trade school or career school, learning how to fund your education is extremely important, right? It's actually very essential towards making, again, that dream of college and furthering your education, your post-secondary plans a reality. All right, so knowing what to apply for, when to apply for it, how to apply for it is going to make all of the difference. So we are going to navigate through the financial aid process. We're going to go into a little bit more in terms of some key steps that you're going to want to take to make sure that you are looking at all of the financial aid that you are eligible for. I am going to see if you all are able to kind of decipher between a financial aid package, because that is really, in the end, you want to make the best choices in terms of funding those dreams. So we're going to start with types of financial aid. And we're going to start with some of the best ones, right? So scholarships, everyone knows about scholarships. Scholarships are free money, right? So it's money that you don't need to repay. And this money helps you pay for college. There are many different types of places that you can find scholarships. If you are a current high school student, you can find scholarships through your school. And if you're a current college student, there are always resources available that can point you in the direction to the best scholarships for you. But you're going to need to do more research than that. I always suggest when applying for scholarships that you start on the local level. Your local level is where you increase your chances for the best scholarship opportunities. That means looking at your local banks, right? Places that, and usually they do have scholarship programs. You're starting with your schools, your high schools, your colleges. They often have scholarship programs. These are where you're going to have the best odds because you're not competing with the entire state. You're not competing with the entire country, right? So that is really where you do want to start in terms of finding scholarships. There's a lot of criteria for scholarships. There are a lot of criteria for scholarships that you want to look at when you're looking into scholarships. So scholarships are going to be paying attention to things like academic merit, right? So that means how rigorous of a course load you have, what your GPA is. So you always want to be maintaining great academic progress. Scholarships may look at financial need, meaning they're looking at your family's financial resources and assets and things like that. They want to know how much do you need the scholarship. Scholarships may also look at things like your athletic skill, artistic talent, community involvement, volunteer work experience, or even an affinity group. An affinity group really means a group of things that people share in common, right? So if you're a part of a particular type of a club, or your family is a part or has an association with maybe a church or something like that, right? Whatever that affinity group, those are also places that you want to look at as resources for where to find scholarships. And then how much money can you get? Well, scholarships can range from the smallest of amounts to the highest of amounts. Now, the smaller the amount, the more likely or easier the scholarship is to obtain, and the higher the amount. Talking about your 25,000, 50,000 types of scholarships, usually you're competing against a very large pool of people. All right. So how much you get really is going to vary. And that is something that you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, scholarships, just to note, scholarships can be paid directly to you as an individual if you receive it, or it can be paid directly to a college. And scholarships really can be utilized in whatever way you need to help towards your college expenses. Okay, we have a question from online in regards to, do you need to have a bank account with that particular bank? You want to look at the criteria of the scholarship. So if you are, I'll use as an example, if you're a Massachusetts resident, Harbor One is an example, has a scholarship. And they would generally have criteria that would say either maybe you have an association, parent, or someone may need to have an account or affiliation, but at the end of the day, you're going to want to look at the criteria specified on that scholarship application. So that will let you know. Not in every instance will you have a requirement like that, but it is still a great place to start and just look at the criteria. Great question. Now we're going to move on to our second type of financial aid, which is another great resource to have, financial resource to have, which are grants. So grants are also free money that helps students to pay for their college expenses. And they don't have to be repaid. However, this can be conditional. So whereas scholarships, you get that's free money for you. Grants can have conditions, still free money, but they may have requirements that you must meet in order to either receive it or keep it, right? So U.S. Department of Education offers a variety of federal grants to students attending different colleges and universities, as well as career schools. In addition, your state can also provide grant opportunities as well. So when we get to the financial aid application part, you're going to see a little bit more of that. So your federal level as well as your state level provides grant opportunities. So through the financial aid process, you are eligible to be considered for different types of federal grants. So for example, one of the best grants that you can get when you apply for federal financial aid is called the federal Pell Grant. Now, if you have maximum eligibility, that grant can be up to $7,395 for the academic year. There are other smaller grants, such as the federal SEOG grant, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, as well as other very specific types of grant, depending on what you are interested in. So if you're someone who wants to become, let's say, a teacher, there's actually a teacher grant, right? There are grants for different circumstances and situations, which takes us over to our state grants. So we are here in Massachusetts, so I'm going to focus content on the state of Massachusetts, but if you're from out of state, you can look at your state's resources. So free community college is actually a grant. There is money for that purpose. Other common grants would be the Mass Grant, the Mass Grant Plus. There's also the foster child grant, right? So as you start to go down into the types of grants eligible, that's where you're starting to see a lot of these conditions that apply, right? There's even grants for if you're adopted, right? So there are a variety of grants that are eligible that have different criteria and conditions. There is the Massachusetts Gilbert Matching State Student Grant, the Massachusetts Part-Time Grant, the Massachusetts Public Service Grant. There are so many different grants depending on what you are interested in and what you are eligible for. So these are going to be things that you're going to want to pay attention to when you're applying for financial aid.
That's not if you're going for education.
No, that's a great question. So the FSEOG grant is not specific to education. Yes. Was there a question in the chat? No. Okay, perfect. Yes. Very good question. So it's really generally the criteria that goes with it. So the Mass Grant criteria is for a certain level of student, and then the Mass Grant Plus just has different conditions that make you eligible for that specific funding. Okay, but I can talk to you a little bit more after and go into the details of that. Now, I want to end here in terms of grants on when I said conditions. If you fail to meet the conditions of a grant, you may need to repay that grant, right? So that sounds a little bit different than scholarships, right? Free money, you get it, you use it for school. Hopefully you do what it's intended for. Grants, as an example, I'll use the Teach grant if you're someone who's interested in education. That has conditions. You have to when you're finished in your education, you need to go into a particular part of education. You need to work in a certain type of a field for a certain minimum amount of years. If you fail to do that, that grant can then turn into a loan, right? Kind of interesting, right? So it's free money, but if you don't meet the conditions, it can turn into a loan, right? So you always want to make sure that when you're eligible for a grant, that you are paying attention to what the conditions are, and you are making sure that you are on top of meeting all of the criteria. Student loans, right? So we hear a lot about student loans, right, in the world, right, in our country. So student loans are money that is borrowed, right? So you're using this money to be able to pay your educational expenses with the promise, right, that you are going to repay it at some point, right? So the best time is when you finish graduating, you have your degree and you're no longer in school at that point, then you have a grace period, and then you'll begin to make payments on your student loans. Student loans, in terms of federal funding, which again, we're talking about our federal financial aid at this point, you are eligible for a direct subsidized loan. A direct subsidized loan is based on having eligibility income-wise, because subsidized really means that while you're in school, you do not have to pay interest on that. You don't have to pay any interest on that loan. But there's also eligibility for something called a direct unsubsidized loan. And that loan can have interest accruing while you are in school from the moment it is dispersed, which means it is paid to your student account. The great thing about a direct loan is that all students are eligible for it. So does it matter? You don't have to have credit. You don't have to have, because most students, right, if you're a high school student or college student, you're not going to have credit like that, right? Not yet. So you can automatically receive it. Just the type is going to be dependent on whether you have a financial need, or you can make $1 million and still get a direct unsubsidized loan. So that is the distinction. I want to talk a little bit about the direct plus loan. Now, this is not something that as a high school student going off to college, or even as a undergraduate student, meaning that you don't have your bachelor's degree, that you're going to be applying for, but your caregiver would, your parent might go out and say, I'll help you with your educational expenses. And so we have the direct plus loan. You used to call it a lot of it the parent plus loan, right? So that's made to graduate and professional students, but specifically parents of dependent undergraduate students, right? So that is a loan that you do have to have credit, right? You do have to have things in order in terms of being eligible for that. And oftentimes undergraduate students may need to look into having additional support depending on the type of school you go to and the cost, right? So in this presentation, the expectation is that everyone has goals to go everywhere, whether that is the community college or that is a state college or university. Your expenses are, again, going to look different. So what you may need may depend. So I want you to know that when you are a first-year student, so if you're a high school student currently and you're going into school, that you can receive $5,500 in either a subsidized or unsubsidized, and in some situations, it could be partial. As you go on in years, you get to your second year, your third year, you're eligible for more. It's about $1,000 more every year as you go up your academic journey. So if you're a college student, you'll see that your educational loan amounts in this category are higher because your expenses, of course, may also be increasing. But the important thing to, again, remember is that student loans, in terms of federal student loans, are available to you. But again, it is money that it does need to be repaid, and it must be, you must use good consideration in taking it. We're going to talk about work study. So that is another type of financial aid. So work study is really federally funded money that pays you to work. That's really as simple as you can put it. While you are attending school, you can be paid a job, right? You go and you look for a job. It can be on campus, off campus, as long as it has the designation of work study. And while you're working, you're being paid. And that source of money comes from the government. So that is financial aid that you can use. Now, the trick about using work study is it will be listed on your financial aid package if you are eligible for it. However, it does not come off of your actual expenses, right? So when you look and put everything together, you will not see that amount. Let's say it's $1,000 for work study. That's not going to come off of your bill because you haven't earned it yet. So you have to go out and work, but at least the funds are coming from a source, but you will not have that money up front. That is earned money. Now, some things to know about work study is that it is based on financial need. Again, you're working, so it can be paid to you bi-weekly or weekly as employment can be. You can also use these payments towards your educational expenses. So can you then go and pay towards your student account with this funds? Yes, you can. But again, you will not have it upfront, and it does have a limit. So that means that if you work a certain amount of hours, that money eventually will expire, right? So it does have a limit. But work study is also a really great opportunity if you do take advantage of it to do things that you would do in any field in terms of developing new skills, building your resume and so forth. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of if you are eligible for this, and it is a great source of support for students while they are in college. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a resource that is really important. When we talked a little bit about a grant, Free Community College is a grant. And what you all may know, if you're, looking at the news and paying attention to things that are happening, we have now Mass Educate, right? Before we had a program where if you're 25 or older and you didn't have a bachelor's degree, you could go to college for free. But now we have Mass Educate. So Mass Educate tells you that no matter your age or your income, community college is free in Massachusetts. All right, so this program is for Massachusetts residents who have not yet earned a bachelor's degree or four-year degree, right? And you can attend a Massachusetts community college, such as Massasoit Community College or any community college in your community or area that you wish. There are no tuition charges, no fees. That is an amazing opportunity. The program also has an allowance for books and supplies for certain students. So while income doesn't matter for being eligible for free community college, there is funds that has an allowance for books and supplies. That part does matter in terms of your income. So if you have a lower calculation of income, you may be able to receive some extra funds that will help you to pay for those types of things. But even if you made $1 million, you could still go to community college for free. You just would not be eligible for that additional allowance. I also want to talk about tuition guarantee programs. Now, when you look into tuition guarantee programs, it is very custom, meaning that every school has their own definition of a tuition guarantee program. At base, a tuition guarantee program can look like your cost is going to stay the same for the duration of the time that you are enrolled, with a certain expectation of bachelor's degree, giving you 4 years, sometimes an extension of that to complete. But there are really great tuition guarantee programs that do more than that. So I'm going to use the example of UMass Dartmouth, which is here, part of our Commonwealth here in Massachusetts. They have a new program called the UMass Dartmouth Deal, and it is designed to provide financial support for in-state undergraduate students from families with an annual income of under $75,000 or $75,000 or less. This is also conditional, right? So there's certain things that you have to meet in order to receive this as well. This will cover tuition and mandatory fees for college for up to 4 years, and it begins in fall of 2025. Now, both of these programs do have, again, like I said, different conditions to be eligible. So for both, you would need to apply for financial aid through completing the the FAFSA form, which we're going to go into in a moment. I want to say here, because we are in the state of Massachusetts, that if you are someone for some reason who is not eligible to complete a federal FAFSA form, right? There is a form called the MASFA, right? That's the Massachusetts application for state financial aid. We're not going to go over that today, but I just wanted to put that out there as a resource of understanding that in some circumstances, when you are not eligible for federal aid, which considers you for state aid, you can still apply using a MASFA form and be eligible for state aid only. All right. So I'm just going to give you a little bit here in terms of some conditions for these grants, just so as we segue. You do want to make sure that you are a high school completer. That is extremely important. There is information on how long you have to have lived in the state. And you have to make sure that when you're enrolling for the minimum requirements that they are expecting. And then you also have to make sure that you're maintaining satisfactory academic progress. That means that you are persisting, you're passing your classes, you are doing the things that you need to. And then there's other requirements, of course, in terms of whether you're a citizen or a permanent legal resident and all of those things. And I'm happy to discuss and chat a little bit more if you have any questions regarding these programs and how they can be very beneficial for you in thinking about how you fund your dreams, right? How do you make the reality of college happen, or being a college completer happen? So now we're going to start on our first application, which is the free application for federal student aid, which is called the FAFSA. I see a question had popped up. I'm going to get your question in one moment. What was that question about?
It's for free college in Massachusetts. If you start at a community college, does it continue when you transfer to a four-year college so that you can earn?
So, say that again. Oh, okay. The question, can you say that one more time?
For free college in Massachusetts, if you start at a community college, does it continue when you transfer to a four-year college so that you can earn a four-year degree?
Okay, so the question being, if you're doing the free community college, does that continue once you have completed and you're going on to work on a 4 years bachelor's degree? So the program very specifically is for community college. So meeting the conditions and the requirements for that, it will be free for you while you are enrolled in that community college. But when you transfer now and you're ready to go on to your 4-year college, now you're not in the free community college program anymore. You could go over to the UMass deal if you and if that was still applicable and happening during the time that you would get there. And you could do that program, but if you're applying somewhere else that doesn't have that opportunity, then you'd be going through the traditional channels of financial aid at that time. But that's a great question. You could kind of create your path. So if you're starting with community college and you're getting that for free, then you can look and see if there are other programs that are happening that you may be eligible for through that 4-year college to continue your education, and see if you could also find some sort of support towards your expenses. Yes, Tisha Renee, yes, I can chat with you a little bit more around the UMass program. Yes.
Are there certain colleges we need to look at community-wise so that all of that transfers if you do transfer?
So that's a different area. Oh yes. Thank you. So your question is around if you're in a community college and you're taking courses, is there anything that you specifically have to do to make sure that those credits can transfer? Right. So community college has a very specific standard that if you are in, of course, community colleges are funded by the state. If you're transferring to a four-year state university, like you're going to UMass Boston or UMass Lowell or UMass Amherst or Dartmouth, those credits will automatically transfer. Like you don't have to worry about them. However, if you transfer to a four-year private school, it's at their discretion whether they wish to accept those credits or not accept those credits. But the community college programs have their own kind of guarantee that you don't have to worry about that if you're transferring into this whole Massachusetts system of education. But you have to look case by case on whether your credits would be applicable to a private institution. But I'd say most standard courses that you're going to take will very specialized, types of classes may or may not, depending on what your course of study, your program is going to be. Very good question. All right, so we are at the FAFSA, right? So we're talking about the free application for federal student aid. Now, this is the main form that you will complete to be eligible for student aid, which we talked about as federal grants, your work study funds, and your loans. Notice I did not say scholarships, right? So they are specifically looking at funds that may come from that top level. Scholarships, you're still eligible for it coming from outside sources or internal sources, depending on the type of school you're applying to. But for the actual federal FAFSA form, that is what it's giving you consideration for from that top level. All right, so by completing the FAFSA form, you're also eligible for state aid. So you don't have to go and do a separate state application if you're eligible for the federal application, as they will automatically look at state aid for you, right? And we also want to look at institutional funding, which I'm actually going to talk a little bit about a little bit later, okay? So completing and submitting the FAFSA form is free. There is no cost. So if you are a current high school student and you're looking around, you want to make sure that you are on the government website for this application. There is no charge to complete. All right. And this will give you, again, access to financial aid to help you pay for school. I want to talk about some myths, things that people perceive to be true, or they hear from individuals, or they make assumptions that kind of decrease, your ability to get as much financial aid as you're eligible for. So oftentimes you might hear someone say, well, my parent makes too much money, so I'm not going to qualify for any financial aid. So you automatically assume that you're just not going to get any aid. So you drag your feet, or you just you're just not going to do it. And you're not going to do it because you don't think you're going to get anything, right? Remember when I talked about even student loans, you can make $1 million and get an unsubsidized direct loan. You still want to always make sure that you are applying for financial aid just like anyone else. You don't want to make an assumption because, again, there are a lot of new programs, a lot of new rules. So what you once was thought of as too much money is not today, not in the world with prices and things like that. So don't make it that assumption. Make sure you always apply. Don't assume. You might hear, my parent doesn't want to give me any financial information because they don't want to be responsible for any expenses. This one's so very common, right? Sometimes you feel like, okay, a parent is like, you're grown, right? You don't need my information to do it. Unfortunately, as we'll get to on another slide, their information is going to be required, but it does not make your it may be required, but it does not make your parent liable for your expenses. It is your student account when you go to college in your name, not your parent's name, right? So unless your parent goes out and applies for a loan for you, they're not liable otherwise to a school by completing a FAFSA for you. It's really just allowing the school to know what you may have access to. Doesn't mean your family's going to give it to you, but they just want to know what you could have access to. All right. I support myself, so I don't have to include my parent on the FAFSA form. So we're going to talk about what a parent is defined as based on the federal requirement, right? So even though you might support yourself to a college, you may or may not be considered what we call an independent student, right? So That doesn't matter. You still have to fill it out, and figuring out and understanding if you are to include your parent, we will cover in a moment. My parent lives in another country, so I don't have to list their financial aid on my FAFSA. Very, very, very common, right? There are a lot of students who are here, parent, one parent, two parent, could be living in another country. Still need their financial information if you are determined to be a dependent student. All right. I should wait to see what colleges or schools I am accepted into before completing my FAFSA form or adding them to my application. No, no, no. You want to make sure that you are filling out those applications, even with what you anticipate. So even if you haven't finished applying, but you know, I think I'm going to be applying to this school and that school, you complete your financial aid on schedule. You add in those colleges, even if in the end you don't apply there, that is okay. You still want to make sure that your application is on time so that you are considered for as much aid as possible. And the great thing about a FAFSA now is that you can add up to 20 schools. I don't know how many people are applying to 20 schools, but if you are, you have that ability. And then even so, you can still take them off and add more. So it doesn't hurt to put all the schools that you want in your application, but you still want to apply on time. If I don't receive enough money after completing my FAFSA, then I can't attend college. That is a myth. There are many pathways to getting to college. If you have support in your school, whether that's your high school or your college, there are community organizations that also support in figuring things out, right? You can still go to college. We just talked about free college. we talked, there's so many opportunities and ways. You might just need to navigate a different pathway, but that doesn't mean that you can't go to college. So we're going to talk through the most common questions in financial aid in the application that you want to be aware of, right? So who's completing a FAFSA? Who should complete a FAFSA? So our 2025-2026 FAFSA is done whether you're a high school, if you're a high school senior, and you're graduating, you're doing your 2025-2026 because that's the year if you're planning to enroll anytime from graduation, from fall through the spring of 2026. If you're a college student and you're currently enrolled, you got to make sure you have done your 2025-2026. You're doing a FAFSA every year to be eligible for that next round of consideration. FAFSA eligibility is for U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens. So there's a definition for that. So you want to make sure that you have that information in terms of applying. But as I stated earlier, that if you are not eligible to complete the FAFSA form, that the MASFA form for certain circumstances also applies. All right, so for the FAFSA form, when you're completing this, the Massachusetts priority filing date has been for a very long time always May 1st. That doesn't mean you go and you fill out your financial aid application on April something, right? You want to make sure when the application comes out, you are ready to apply. And the great thing about financial aid, nowadays is that you already have your family should have all the financial information needed to complete the application, because it is nothing that is slowing you down from being able to complete it. So you already have the years of information that the FAFSA is looking for. All right. You want to apply as early as possible. The earlier you apply, the better access to financial aid, because there are some programs that are first come, first serve. So if students are applying and financial aid is being awarded and you're applying at the tail end of your state's deadline, you are losing potential access to funds. So you always want to apply as early as possible. And as I said, for anyone who may be from out of state, you want to also look at your state's deadline there, but you are going based on each college's deadline. You want to find the earliest one. So if you're applying to 10 schools and the deadline for their financial aid application is, let's say, January 15th, You're applying for everything, all the schools, everything is going on there regardless of the deadline. You're looking at the earliest one. But I say you apply as early as the applications come out, which generally is October. Okay. So that is super important. Yes.
So you have to attend till fall of 26. We have to wait for the 26, 27 that will come out next fall.
Yes, that is correct. So the question was, for anyone who's on our Zoom who might not be a senior, maybe you are a junior, you are going to be looking to complete the application with the years for the time that you are going to be enrolled. So if you are a junior, you would be looking at the 2026, 2027 FAFSA because that would encompass the time frame that you would be planning to enroll in school. Great question. Yes.
For like
Mhm.
parent, college. FSA ID can be secured early, so the parent has to have an FSA ID and the student has to have an FSA ID. And you can get that prior to
Yep.
applying for.
So that the feedback, the comment was to anyone out there that you will need, of course, a FSA ID to complete your FAFSA, but you do not have to wait until you are a senior applying for school. You can get your FSA ID early and making sure that you're all set, verified, and good to go. But yes, you're going to be going to the government's page that that has actually, there is actually a source of many things that has to do with financial aid. If you end up with a student loan or anything like that, it's all in the same place. Studentaid.gov. All right, so talking about dependency and independency, actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to have us take a short 5-minute break. Okay, so I want everyone to hold tight as we take this break, and then we will be back and we will continue. Okay, so if you're online, stretch your legs, and then we will be back. Okay, so we are going to continue on in our presentation. So hopefully those of you online who had a moment to get up and stretch. And now we are going to talk about dependency versus independency. So, right, remember that myth around, well, I'm on my own, I kind of do my own thing. So I don't need to have anyone's information, any parental information necessary, right? So there is a standard that you can follow to determine whether you are going to be considered a dependent student or an independent student when it comes down to completing your FAFSA and what a college is going to consider in terms of looking at your application. So you can answer these questions. If you were you born before January 1st, 2002? So simply put, you need to be 26 and over to be considered. And just looking at age alone, if you're under 26, that generally means that you need your parental information. Now, it sounds odd, right? Because 18 is an adult, 21 is an adult. So you're wondering why, if you're 23, 24, 25, why is that necessary? It is just the standard because they want to look at what you may have access to. And for them, that is the designated age. So if you were born before January 1st, if you were born before January 1st, 2002 is what you want to look at. As of today, are you married? Right. So, I mean, you can, there are individuals who are young and are married. If you are married, you would be considered an independent student. At the beginning of the 2025-2026 school year, so when you're completing this, you're not there yet. So they want you to kind of fast forward, and they want to know, will you be working on an advanced degree? So that would be something like a master's degree or doctoral program, right? You're working on something beyond a bachelor's degree. Then, if you can say yes, you'd be considered independent. Right. If you are serving currently on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training, right? Other than training, or if you are a National Guard or Reserves SD, you are on active duty for other than the state or training purposes. So you have to look at this one in a general state. So, but if you can say yes, then you're considered independent. If you're a veteran, means of the United States Armed Forces, you're considered an independent person. If you have children or other people who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you between July 1st, 2025 and June 30th, 2026. So that again is looking at the years of looking at the time frame of when you are enrolled in school, right? Having children that having at least a child that receives more than half, and that's the criteria. Because if it is questioned that you have a child, but you are not the one that provides more than half of their support, they can consider you to be dependent. So that second part of the question is essential. You must also be providing for more than half of their financial support. If after the age of 13, you are an orphan, right? Or you're a ward of the court, or you are in foster care, you would be considered an independent student if you can answer yes to any of those three. Or you are an emancipated minor as determined by a court, you would be considered independent. If you're in legal guardianship with someone other than your parent or step parent as determined by a court, you'd be considered independent. And then if any time after July 1st, 2024, you are an unaccompanied minor, that means or you were homeless or self-supporting or being at risk of homelessness. That's actually much more common. Then you can answer yes, you'd be considered an independent student. So yes, if you can answer yes to one or more of these questions for federal student aid purposes, you are independent and you're not required to provide provide information on your parents on the FAFSA form. If you answered no to every question, so the other one was yes to at least one question for But otherwise, if you answered no to every question, you're going to be considered a dependent student and must provide information about your parent. Now, next question that you're going to get automatically from that is, what's a parent, right? Because that's a very, everything looks very different, right? So everyone's situation, circumstances look very different. So if you answered no to all those questions and you are considered a dependent, whose information are we looking for this financial aid, right? So the definition of a parent in these circumstances is a legal, whether biological or adoptive, parent or person that the state has determined to be your legal parent. A step parent is considered a parent if they have adopted you. So that's really big. Biological or adoption is the main parent. That's what they're looking at, or is considered the parent. A step parent that has not adopted you is considered a parent spouse, right? And they're pulled in if your parent is pulled in and they are married to the parent. Okay, that is going to be used on the financial aid. So that's the workaround with that. So the categories of this: married, biological, or adoptive parents. That's a main category. But you might have an unmarried biological or adoptive parents that live together. Now, there was a day where if you had a parent and they were separated from your other, biological parent, or you're in an adopted situation and they were separated and they were living together, they were not living together or living together, that they wouldn't consider that other person. They would only look at legally, technically, this parent, right? Who is considered to be more of your like custodial parent. But now they do not look at it that way. They're looking at finding and figuring out where your assets may be, where the finances may be to support you. So that category of unmarried biological or adoptive parents either living together or not living together. Unmarried biological or adoptive parents not living together but remarried. So I'll go into that. So if your biological or adoptive parents are married to each other, then both parents' information is required. If taxes were filed jointly, only one parent is required to complete the information for both parents and sign the application, right? So both parents in this situation wouldn't need an FSA ID. One would, because both parents are married and they have filed their taxes together. But if both parents file their taxes separately, both parents must fill in their information and both need an FSA ID to sign the application. If your biological or adoptive parents are not married to each other but live together, then both parents' information is required, even if they were never married, all right? Or if they were separated or divorced. That's if they live together. Their individual information, and both will need an FSA ID to sign the application. If your biological or adoptive parents are not married to each other and don't live together, then one parent's information will be required. Either the parent who contributed more financially over the past 12 months, or if neither contributed more, the parents whose income and assets are higher are required to provide the financial information, have an FSA ID to sign the application. Now, if that person who is designated as the parent is married or remarried in that situation, that step parent is also required to provide individual information, have an FSA ID, and sign if they did jointly file with that parent. Right. So those are the circumstances. So you might look for those of you online present, you look at the different circumstances, but that'll kind of give you a guide as to whose information is going to be needed or not, and who needs to make sure that they have an FSA ID, depending on how you may have filed, your parent may have filed their taxes. So we're down to what information is needed. Okay, so the FAFSA, I just want to make a notation that the FAFSA is also available in a paper format, right? It's online, but it's also available in a paper format. I would never encourage you to use paper unless you meet a criteria that would make it required for you to. I would urge you to complete your application online on the only website that you should be going to, which is studentaid.gov. So you are going to need an FSA ID, which is an account username and password that you'll log in to the studentaid.gov, and you'll be able to start the FAFSA form electronically. Now, I want to give you a heads up. If you never had an FSA ID, you never created it in advance, and you're doing it all at the same time, it will take a few days to verify your identity. So it is always great to get a head start on completing your FSA ID so that you can actually make sure that you can use it in all the circumstances that you would need to as you go through your education. You are going to need to have a social security number. You are going to need to have an or if you don't, everyone's going to need a social security number. You're going to need an alien registration number if you are not a US citizen. And you're going to be looking at 2023 income information, right? So we're like, well, if we're talking about a 2025, 2026 year, why are we looking at 2023? Well, there was once a day where you needed to use current information, and everyone used to rush around trying to get their taxes done. And I got to, my child has to do their financial aid, and it was mass chaos, and used to create a lot of delays. And then there was a period of time where they said, you know what, let's use prior information going back so that no one has to worry and wait on look that their taxes aren't done to complete their financial aid. So you'll be looking at 2023 information to complete your 2025, 2026. And so for those, for you, if you're a junior, you're going to be looking at that time to be using your 2024 federal income tax information. So it will keep going like that, but that information will already be done by the time you get to starting to apply. So there's no delays. All right, you're going to need your 2023 federal income tax return if applicable, right? Because not everyone files taxes, right? And when I say I mean like if you are you as a student. So if you're not working, you didn't have to file taxes, and you don't have to worry about that part. If you did and you filed, you're going to want to make sure that, that's the information that's going to be used. You're going to want to know the balance of what you might have in the bank and your cash, savings, and checking accounts. Any cash you have, savings, and checking accounts. So they're looking there towards assets in that way. You want to have handy your bank statements and records of investments. Obviously, if you're a student, you might have a bank account, but you may not have any investments, and that's okay. But again, students range in, as young and as old, and so people might have different circumstances, like I said in the beginning. And then the rest of things go into like your investments, and if you have any businesses or farms and things like that. If you have any untaxed income, and if you have any records of any sort of child support. Now, if you are a dependent student, your parent's going to need most of the same information, right? And I said most of this information because not everything is going to apply. All right. Okay. All right. One thing I'm going to note here, which is a little bit different. So if a parent does not have to have a social security number, right? You as a student, you must be an eligible person to be able to apply for federal student aid, right? And we talked earlier about if certain circumstances, you can look at completing a MASFA for Massachusetts financial aid application and then being considered for state aid. Parents, in terms of doing your financial aid, they do not have to, right? So your parent or spouse doesn't need a social security number to create a studentaid.gov account and complete their section of the FAFSA. All right. So if you're inviting a parent or spouse that doesn't have a social security number, there is a box that you'll check off in the application that you can indicate that they do not have one. All right. And you're not to enter anything else otherwise in that field. All right. But then we start drilling into deeper levels of financial aid. So I'm going to stop there in terms of that. But these are the basic things that you will need to be able to do it. Now, a really great thing that has happened over time with financial aid, there was a point, I'm not going to date myself, there was a point where everyone would rush around and they would collect all their taxes and all their stuff and used to manually type in line by line by line by line all the pieces of your tax forms, which created a lot of headache and burden on individuals and people needing a super lot of support. Now, while you can add information manually, it is set up now, more nowadays, for you to have your information, consent to have your information down, like brought over from the IRS, right? So they kind of connected the system. So you don't need to look around for your tax forms. They will import it for you. Before, there was a point where they say, would you like to import it? And then you would connect to your taxes account to your FAFSA. And you could just not do it if you didn't want to, manually enter it. Now it is more of a priority. They automatically will see if you have taxes. They'll check, they'll know it already. So it makes that process 1,000 times easier than it used to be. All right. So that's just something for your awareness, as you will import. And even if you didn't file taxes, they'll know that you didn't file taxes because they'll see that there's no record with the IRS, right? So that's something that has made doing your FAFSA form much easier. Now, what happens after you complete your financial aid form? You did everything you were supposed to, you signed it, you have everything that you're supposed to do, you added your schools, you've done all of the things. When you finish and you have submitted your FAFSA, you are going to receive a SAI, which stands for Student Aid Index Number, right? This is newer over the past years. There used to be something called an EFC, but we don't do EFCs now. It is a Student Aid Index. Now, this changes how colleges look at awarding aid. It's actually looked at a little bit different, a little bit better than the way an EFC used to be calculated. So this number, which is received in your FAFSA submission summary. So as soon as you finish doing your FAFSA, it calculates everything and it'll give you kind of a confirmation page. In that submission summary, they determine your eligibility for federal student aid. What's important to understand is that this number that you get, this SAI number, is not, this is how much aid I'm going to get, or this is, it has nothing to do with that. It's really to help the college to have a gauge. All right. The number that you're going to see can range anywhere from negative 1,500 to 9999999, right? Your SAI will help your school determine what level of financial support you may need. For example, if you have a lower SAI, it means the higher your financial need is, and the higher your likelihood that you'll qualify for need-based aid, like we talked about the federal Pell Grant, which is upwards of $7,000, $7,300 and some odd dollars, right? So that's great. Now, some facts about the SAI. The SAI is not the amount of aid that a student will receive, as I said, what their family is expected to contribute, or the final financial aid offer. So you don't really want to analyze that number in a technical sense. It's really for the college to determine. All right. And it's going to be based on the total financial resources the student and their parent has. Now, note that's the student and the parent. Student section, parent section, they're looking at everything that both individuals or those individual sets have, minus the minimum amount needed for the family's annual living expenses. So this is why it changed from an EFC, which was very, very specifically looking at, what you have, your assets, and it wasn't really taking into account people still have to have money to live, right? People still need to be able to take care of their basic needs, and a concrete number is not really going to say you should be able to afford this, exorbitant amount. So the SAI is giving a more humanistic, realistic approach to calculations for financial aid, right? So they're taking more of a look at maybe what you need to live and your different in those living expenses. So the calculation of that is SAI equals total financial resources of student and their parents minus the minimum amount needed for the family's annual living expenses. All right. Any questions around that? Yes.
So, they guesstimate, or do we have to gather on?
I knew that question would come. Yes. So no, you don't gather. They have their own formulas, right? When they're pulling in, they're asking you different questions, they're doing different things. They come up with their own calculation of that. But good question, right? So we're using 2023 information, right? That may not be we're in 2025 though. That's not necessarily your current income. It could have been way higher than it is now, or vice versa. So there are opportunities if you, which we call a financial aid appeal, that if what they calculated and estimated and put together really does not fit your family's, it doesn't make sense, you can appeal your financial aid, and then you can provide actual documentation of expenses. Like, this is, you know, the mortgage, the rent, this is really what we're facing, for them to do a recalculation of your financial aid. All right. Yes.
So the SAI, so you guys, and I apologize if I said it not number, the total financial risk of the student and their parents. So we have another child younger, and I know they look at the bank accounts, right? So my son's made money from working, they look at our bank account, this is what we're holding up our financial. Do I have to report my other child's bank account if they work?
No, you're just looking at your child, your question. Oh, I'm gonna repeat the question. Thank you. I need those reminders. So the question we have in the room is, if you are they're looking at the total parent and student financial resources, looking at things like bank accounts. If you have other children in the home that have bank accounts, you need to report that information. So no, the answer is only what is applicable to the student. However, if you have one bank account, you put all their money in there together, and half of it is one student, and half of it is the other student, you got to put that whole number. So it's always good to make sure that you separate, and those resources are just for that student. And so that's a great question. All right. I'll make some sides for any of the parents. The SAI formula also includes child support received as an asset, not income. That matters when they do their calculation. For those, let's see. There was a time, I'll make this notation. There was a time that if you had multiple children multiple children that were, multiple children in college, that the division of each child in college would, it would divide your, that number into those parts. They don't do that anymore. So, that is just something to be aware of. So if you do have more than, you have a sibling, and they're also in college, those types of things, they calculate all of that very differently now. But if anyone has any questions again around any of those things, I'm happy to chat more. Now, rounding us out is our CSS profile. Right. So this is where we're going to talk about institutional financial aid. So we talked about federal financial aid, which through doing a FAFSA form trickles down, right? You're eligible for your state aid. They look at you for that money as well. Now, if you're not going to, if you are going to go to a private school, right? They have their own additional resources, different than our community colleges and our state colleges. So if you're going to apply to a particular private school, they may require additional information that they're not going to get on a FAFSA, right? They're going to want to know a lot more. So if you happen to be someone that is considering a private institution, you are going to want to look at if you are required to complete a CSS profile. Now, this doesn't replace the FAFSA. You still have to do the FAFSA, but you're going to want to look on that each college and find out, do they also need a CSS profile? And again, none of your state schools here are going to be asking you for this form, whether community college or state college or university, but you're definitely going to want to make sure that you are looking at your private colleges and universities to see if they require it. So what is this? We all see that this is a College Board product. So it's a College Board application that you're using. And it's used by colleges, but also some scholarship programs also look at this as well. And it is how a college awards non-federal institutional aid. All right. And so again, it's done in addition to your FAFSA. So we talked about who does it. Any private school that is requiring it, you're just going to have to do that research to make sure that you are completing it. You are completing it and on time. And then you would do this at the same time as you would be doing your FAFSA, which is starting from around October 1st. Something to note about the CSS profile that's very different than FAFSA, even though they also look for ways to get that other information. Like, let's say two parents are unmarried and they both live in the same place. Well, now they're going to get both information where it was different. Or if they were divorced and living in the same place, they want both that information. A divorced parent or separated parent some schools also require that information. So even if on the FAFSA, it didn't ask you and they didn't calculate, they didn't determine that you need that step, you need that other parent's information. If you're applying to a school that requires a CSS profile, they may still want you to have that non-custodial parent complete a separate CSS profile, which is generally called the non-custodial CSS profile, right? Because they want to know all the things, all right? Where the FAFSA form is free, right? No money, no cost. There could be a cost, and I'm going to say could because there are some things, there is a workaround. So the CSS profile at face cost is $25 for the application. And then for every school that you want to add. So remember that list, like you could apply up to 20. You want to apply to 20 schools, again, breaking that all down depending on what's what. It's $16 for each additional institution. All right. But I said may because this coming as a College Board product, you can be eligible for a waiver. All right. So a fee waiver, if you're eligible, will then take off that cost. So it could end up being free if you are eligible, right? And if you're a high school student, you would know if you did the SATs or required to do that. If you had a waiver, then you're likely to be eligible as well on your CSS profile. What you're going to need is similar to your FAFSA, but there may be additional information that the school requests. And they're asking for a very much more detailed set of information, especially around assets and untaxed income. All right. Who's required? We talked about this. You're looking at this based on which colleges may require it, the student and parents for dependent students. And if a student's parents are divorced or separated, some colleges again may require that additional information. So now what we're going to do, for those of you online, you're going to be able to see it up front. I'm going to pass around something just so that you all can see it a little bit clearer. We're going to do a little exercise. All right, we're going to do a little very simple exercise. You don't have to write, you don't have to do anything. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. I want to see if you all are paying attention, right? So all those little tricks that we talked about, all those little things that we spoke about in regards to the different types of aid, free money, conditional money, all of those types of stuff. Because in the end, the goal, you've completed your FAFSA. You saw your FAFSA summary, you have your SAI number. Now what happens? You're going to start getting to those schools that you were accepted to. You're going to start getting financial aid packages, right? And those financial aid packages are looking to say, okay, great. This is what we calculated. We determined that we can offer you based on cost of attendance, what you're eligible for, and so forth. So we're going to review a sample financial aid letter worksheet, and we're just going to take a look at these packages. And I'm going to ask you to determine which of those packages do you think is the better choice, right? I try to confuse you a little bit, so don't worry. Don't worry about if it looks, if you're not sure, it's okay. So which?
You had a question about CSS profile.
Oh yes, of course. We have a question.
Load all the financials and all that in it, but do you have to have all your schools picked out so that it goes automatic, or can you fill it out and then pick the schools you want? Like, do I need to know already because it's going to start sending them?
Very good question, right? Very good question. So you can always, and the same actually applies also to the FAFSA. If you later decide, like, you know what, I just want to, these are the schools that I'm putting in, even though I said on the FAFSA, you should always add, even if you're not going to apply, you're thinking probably the dollar, like if you have to pay, you're not eligible for a waiver. you can always add on later. So even if you have an either application, once it's processed, you can always go back and add on a scholarship.
Fill that out.
Yeah, yes. But you can always go back and add additional colleges at a later date. Yep. All right. So we talked about grants, scholarships, loans, work, study, right? We talked a little about plus loans and so forth. So we're going to look at which is the best financial aid package. So we have college A and we have college B, right? And interestingly enough, this data is based on your state and your upstate and a private university is really the comparison. And yes, the cost of attendance it can really be up there. So taking advantage of those great resources that are available through like free college and tuition guarantee program, things like that are really great. If you are applying to a school that is not eligible for those types of things and you end up with a financial aid package, you do want to make sure that you're making the best decision. So as you can see, for each college, you see a number total for the tuition and fees, housing and food, books, course materials, supplies and equipment, travel and personal expenses, right? So you may not even be thinking if you're an undergraduate, if you're a high school student, yeah, you may need to travel. You may need money to get back and forth home, right? So those are what you might consider indirect costs, but they're still costs that you want to be thinking about. And colleges oftentimes will give some sorts of estimations of things to help you through that. All right. You will see a category in column 4, gift aid, right? So this is calculating the money that is considered free. So your state grant, which could, for this in Massachusetts, we could be looking at like something like a Mass grant, Pell grant, an FSEOG grant, and maybe some other scholarships, right? So as a private school, there's resources that are available. You're looking at your net cost. So when you subtract your cost of attendance by your aid, by your gift aid, then you're moving into now, okay, the free money part's gone. Let me look at what you actually need, which we considered colleges call self-help. How are you going to help towards that cost? That's that category where taking out student loans starts to become a category. So you see your direct loan. In the first column for the college A, you see that a plus loan is listed, right, for $12,000. You also see federal work study listed on there as well for $1,500. Comparative to college B, right, which has a net cost of $8,500 compared to college A, $12,400 before self-help, looking at loans and so forth. You see that college B has self-help for $5,500 in a direct loan and only federal work study for $1,500. After that, calculating that, you see that you still need about $1,400 at face value and $1,500 for college B. If you're in the chat, you can tell me, do you think college A or college B is the best choice and why? And for those here, if you want to tell me which one you think is best and why. I'm intentionally going to try and trick you. So let's see what you're thinking. What's the answer in the chat? Okay, we have B in the chat. Okay, you think it's B? Oh, you're gonna throw out A? Okay. All right, okay. A, okay, very good. Okay, so in this scenario, it's just really meant for you to take a extra close look at financial aid packages. There are colleges still that when they award financial aid, if you compare, they can all be very confusing because of the information they put on it. And if you have this aid already fully, or if this is a potential aid. Now, when I say that, we talked about plus loans, right, for parents. We talked about federal work study, right? So if you remember when I talked about work study, I said that won't come off of your actual expenses. So even though the award letter is calculating it in, because it's technically going to be a resource at the end of the day, fully received when you finish working, that does not come off of your bill, right? So that money is not actually covered. So you got to add back in the work study on both of them, right? Because you will not be able to take that off of your actual expenses. Then for college A, you want to look at that nice plus loan that's there, right? And the assumption is hopefully your parent wants to apply, right, for that plus loan, and your parent is eligible and qualifies for that plus loan, right? So, and if that's the case, great. If it's not, then you still are needing to have that supplement. You're still going to need that funding, right? What's the feedback? I love that. I love that. So the comments in the chat are around A has more loans and B, whereas B does not, right? So that's true. You want to look at a package based on not just year one, but all the years that you're going to need. And if you want to reduce your loan opportunities, you might look at the package that doesn't have as much loan responsibility. So in the end, it actually does turn out to be college B, even though in the what you still need shows college A is less, it's not technically less, right? Because you still need to actually work and make the work study, and then you still have to actually be eligible for the plus loan. So in the end, college B actually works out to be financially cheaper. And the actual cost for that would be 14,900 is college A and 3,000 is college B in the end. So very good, very good. So in ending, I want to go over some tips and best practices. All right. Tips and best practices for funding your dreams. Super important is to make a plan with your family to start gathering everything that you are going to need to apply for financial aid. I don't know how many times I've worked with individuals, and when it came time to like getting their social security card and things like that, everyone does things differently. It would be like off in storage somewhere, right? Like not everyone keeps all their information in the same place. So you want to make sure you can actually access the information that you need when it is time. So gathering that information as early as possible will help there not to be as much of a delay. You always want to apply as early as possible when applications open. There is really no reason. There's really nothing that's going to delay you in terms of like having the financial numbers and things like that. So plan for it and apply as early as you can, because again, some aid is based on first come, first serve. When that pot of money is gone, you're still good in applying, but they may not have any more of that mass grant for you or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're applying as early as possible. You want to make sure that you know every deadline and apply by the earliest of deadlines if you're going to go that route versus just getting it done right away. So that is super important. As I just shared, you really want to look at your financial aid package as not just that year. You want to look at it as if you're going to a 2-year college, if it's free college, that's amazing. If you're going to any other type of school, you want to multiply that by 2 or multiply that by 4 if you're going to a 4-year institution. Cost of college can increase year over year. So you really want to be looking at what you see as, can I afford this for the duration? Because the end goal is for you to obtain your degree. You also want to remember that even though there's financial aid, sometimes there's still an out-of-pocket cost. Not in every instance does financial aid cover everything. And in those situations, the best plan is to start to save money. The more money that you can save, if that's a possibility. So if you're a student and you're able to work and you can put some money aside, every little bit helps. And so starting to save as early as you can. If you don't believe that the financial aid package is the best package for you and it does not match your parents' current financial situation, right? Maybe your parents were making more and now they took a pay cut and they're not making that, right? That they're only looking at that snapshot of a certain year in the past, right? So you can request you can reach out to the financial aid department of that college and you can ask them to complete an appeal, which I kind of discussed a little bit about that, but it would require you providing more detailed information to them for them to kind of recalculate. you're going to want to take time to apply for as many scholarships as you can, right? So scholarships are really going to be that first beginning, that best, because scholarships can be in any range of amounts, and every dollar again adds up, and it is really again one of the best courses, one of the best resources that you can access. In Massachusetts, again, there is free community college, right? You can always start in a community college, transfer over to a four-year institution. That is one way that you can help to fund your dreams. All right. So in wrapping up, I would like to be able to open up for any questions. Again, if you have a very customized question, I'm happy to chat with you separately. But I really want to kind of pull together and thank everyone for being here today. Hopefully you've gotten some beginning insight into the financial aid process. It's not a very terribly difficult process. The government has actually made it a lot easier to apply for financial aid than it was in the past. And there's more than one avenue towards being able to fund your dreams, right? There's not just one pathway. There's many options and opportunities, but as long as you're taking advantage of, again, these tips, resources that are available to you, you can make that dream a reality. So, any questions that I can answer for anyone? Yes.
Yeah.
Retirement. Thinking into the fact, I know if you have to complete a CSS profile, it is for sure. I'm not 1,000% sure in terms of the FAFSA. I'm not thinking. I won't. Let me find the right response for that. But on your CSS profile, for sure. Oh, the question was if a parent has an IRA, is that going to be counted in terms of your financial aid application? My response is I can double check for the FAFSA. I feel like the IRA is not necessarily specifically listed, but on the CSS profile, it is 100% considered something that you are going to have to list and share. Okay, any questions in the chat? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is that 2 years or is that 4 years?
So community college is it's 2 years if you are taking classes in, you're taking like a full-time course load and you're persisting through every single semester. Some students take longer to complete community college, or you could take longer to complete four-year college. But and on average, if you're taking a full-time course load, then you can complete it in 2 years. Nope, you would be considered to have an associate's degree. Yep. And then you can, like you asked earlier, you can transfer that. The question was just around, for those of you online, the questions are around the community college level and what you can obtain by having a community college degree, how long, and so forth. Okay, so what I'm going to ask everyone to do is we're going to ask you to do an evaluation for us. Let us know what your thoughts were, any areas that we can do, any ideas for future workshops and so forth. So if you are here in person or at home, if you could take out your mobile device and scan the QR code. If you do not have a QR code, if you do not have a device, I do have some paper ones for you here, but if you can scan and complete that survey, we're going to give you a few minutes to do that. Yes.
Folks with small children, how soon can they get scholarships?
You know what? The question was with if you're a parent and you have small what was it? How early can you look for scholarships? Well, how young can you look for scholarships? That's a good question. And that's a perfect segue because we have a full-blown scholarship workshop. And I'm actually going to pull that up as long as everyone's gotten the QR code. I want to make sure that people online who've gotten it. We have a workshop, Get Your Coins, with our very own Dr. Patricia C. Timmons. And you're going to learn there how to find scholarships to help pay for college so you can get your coins. You're going to learn the best sources for finding free money. You are going to learn the best tips and tricks for completing scholarship applications and even how to write the best scholarship essay. And I am sure she's also going to cover very specifically now how young you can be to find scholarships. And if you haven't registered for this, you can look there for that registration link, bit.ly/OEZ_success to attend either in person or virtually. And we are also going to be hosting that here at Massasoit Community College in collaboration with the Success Scholars Program.
I can give you a tip to get you in there. You can go as young as 8 years old. And to be honest, an 8-year-old can probably full fund their college like first semester if they are aggressive.
The answer to the question, which was around how young, Dr. Patricia C. Timmons is in the house, and she answered that you can be as young as 8 years old and apply for scholarships. So if you want to get more tidbits of information like that, that inner information, please make sure you register and join us either here in person or virtually online. So I want to thank everyone again for coming out. For those of you online, I know was a question in the chat. I'm going to answer that. If you can stay on, I will go in the chat and answer that question for you. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming out on a Saturday. You could be anywhere else, but you are here today. And again, thank you very much to the Success Scholars Program and Massasoit for hosting us here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. To have this program as well as Get Your Coins. If you have someone that you may think in mind that could benefit from being here, please bring them. And as the information goes out, we will be sending it out to those folks who are already here and those on Zoom. Additionally, I'm also a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, the brother organization of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And so just looking forward to more partnerships and having more collaboration on campus. So again, thank you, Kendria, and for having this amazing presentation. And we look forward to working with y'all in the future. All right, thank you.